Hello and welcome to episode 2 of my Shell by Example series. So in this series, we go over how to use the UNIX Shell by actually interacting with it. If you have not seen the previous episodes, which are an intro and then also an overview of how to navigate around your file system, then be sure to check out the playlist linked up here with those two videos. Today, we are going to move on from just moving around our file system to actually interacting with it. So that's going to be creating, updating, and deleting both directories and files. So we're going to start with creation of directories. So the first command that we're going to go over is how to create new directories, which we do with the mkdir command. So mkdir stands for make directories, and how it works is you simply pass it a path. So let's just make one called new dir. And then if we go ahead and ls in our current spot, we can see that we have created a new dir folder or directory. So that is the simplest way to do it. You just pass it a path to a directory and it creates it. There is one other thing that is very useful, because let's say we wanted to create a bunch of empty folders inside of other empty folders that don't exist yet. So if we wanted to mkdir, let's say we wanted top level, sub level, bottom level. We wanted all of these to be created. If we were to go ahead and run that, then we could see we have a problem, because since the sub-level folder doesn't exist yet, since actually none of these directories exist yet, we're not going to be able to create them. The way that we can get around this is with the -p flag, which will go ahead and recursively create directories as we need them for mkdir. So if we were to switch this to mkdir, let's copy that same thing. And very useful thing, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but in most terminals you can just hit the up arrow and it will give you your previous command that you've run. So mkdir, if we were to add the -p flag there, then you'll see we don't get any errors, and if we ls, now we have a top level directory. So if we then go ahead and ls inside of that top level directory, we'll see sub level, and if we go ahead and ls inside of that, we see bottom level. So -p is going to help us by recursively creating those directories. So now that we've covered how to create directories, we're going to move on to the next thing, which is how to create files. So the most basic way to create files is with the touch command. So what touch does is it will create a file if there is no file at the location that you pointed at, and if there is a file at that location, then it will update the times for when it has been accessed and edited. So if we were to go ahead and want to create an empty text file, or an empty file of any sort, as long as it's empty for the touch command, inside of our new dir folder, we could just do touch new dir / myfile.txt or something. Now if we ls inside of new dir, you can see that we have a myfile.txt. And if we were to go ahead and cat that, then you could go ahead and see that it is completely empty, because that's what touch does. So touch, if you point, is basically that. It will create an empty file wherever you point it. I'm not going to get into editors and things like that right now. I may decide to go over different editors in the future, but currently I've been using VS Code and I'm a bit out of practice with Vim, so I'm probably not going to touch that just yet. But pretty much you could go ahead and open that file up in any editor of your choice, or any really program on your computer of any choice, and it would act just like a normal empty file, because that's what you created. So now that we understand how to create both directories and files, we can go ahead into editing them a bit. So we're going to start this with the mv command, which is what we use to move both directories and files. So mv has two forms that we're going to go over. The first is the very simple source target form. So here we just type mv, and then we're going to type the path to the file that we want to move. So let's say we want to move that text file we just made. So that's a new dir / myfile.txt. And let's say we want to move that into that directory structure we made before. Let's say we want to put it inside of top level. So we could move, then we would go ahead and for our source, we would put top level, and then we want to put what it's going to be named there. Let's just keep it named myfile.txt, although you could put anything there and it will move the file just fine, and rename it as well. So now that we've done that, if we go ahead and ls inside of new dir, we'll see that it's now empty. And if we ls inside of top level instead, we see that now the myfile.txt file is over there. So there is one more form that I want to go over, and that's moving multiple files into a single directory. So let's say, first, let's just create a few more files. We'll just put them here for now. So let's make myfile2.txt and another .txt, for instance. So now we have those bunch of folders, but they're all text files, and we had something in our directory structure. If we go ahead and ls here, we have our media / text folder. Let's say we want to move all of those into them. So then what we can do is mv, and we are going to go ahead and move all of those. So we had myfile.txt, we had another .txt. if I could type, and top level slash myfile.txt. So I have all of these files. Let's say I want to move them into our media/text folder. So then I can just go ahead and put media/texts. And now if we go ahead and ls here, you'll see those two files that we created there are no longer there. And if we go ahead and ls inside of our media/texts folder, you'll see all of them got moved here. So that's the other form that you can use for MV, is put a bunch of different sources and then the directory that you want to put them in, and it will move all of those files into that directory without changing their names. So that second form requires more than one text file to be or more than one file of whatever sort to be specified, obviously, because otherwise it would be indistinguishable from the first thing, and it would think that you're trying to move into that existent directory space, which is not okay. So now that we understand how to move around files, we're going to just do one more thing with that updating, and that is the cp or copy command. So this is important. It pretty much does the exact same thing as mv, except for it also keeps the source files where they were. So let's say we want that myfile.txt file to both be inside that media/text folder, but we also want it in the top level of our shell example folder. So we could then just run cp media/texts/myfile.txt, and we're just going to move that into where we are right now. So we could just put that as myfile.txt. We could also put /myfile.txt, as I was about to type before. It's the same thing. So if we go ahead and do that, and then we ls here, you'll see that we now have myfile.txt right back here. But we could also ls inside of media/texts, and myfile.txt is still there as well. So that's how CP works. So CP actually has the exact same two forms of MV. We could do the same thing before where we're copying multiple files into a single directory. So let's give an example of that. Let's copy all those files that we moved into media texts right back into the top level of our folder. So if we want to cp media/texts/another and media texts, let's move my file too. Let's move both of those, and we want to, or not move, but copy. Let's copy both of those into where we currently are. So that's our current directory is just dot. So if we go ahead and run that, and we ls here, we can see those two text files have been moved in here. And if we ls inside of media/texts, they're still there as well because we used copy. So now that we have that covered, we can move on to deletion. So deletion is going to use the rm or remove command. So rm has a lot of important options and flags, so I recommend you go over the manual for that at some point if you can, and I'm going to go over some of them here. So in our most basic form for rm, we can pass it a list of file names and it will delete them. So if we want to go ahead and get an example of that, we just copied a bunch of copies of these text files here. We don't need them here, we just need them where they were before. So we could just go ahead and rm myfile.txt, or we could also rm, let's do another, and the second myfile. So we can also give it a list, and it will delete all of them. So the other options we can do is, now we're going to move on to flags. That's the most basic form that we can use, but we can also use -r. So -r is used when you want to delete a directory recursively, so that will delete the directory and everything in it. So we had that top level folder. Let's say we don't need that directory structure anymore. We can go ahead and rm-r, our top level folder. And if we go ahead and list that now, it's completely gone. So that's what you're going to do when you're deleting directories, because if you just try to run rm-newdir, for instance, we're just going to get is a directory, which means we can't use rm in its purest form with that. So there are a few other important flags like -f. -f is used to force the removal of files or folders, and that you're mainly going to use when you're editing, when you need to delete system folders. So you're going to want to be careful with that, and it's going to require permissions, which is something we're going to go over next time. But if you do not have permission to delete a folder in its normal form, or it's protected in some way, then you can use -f to force the deletion of that folder. So that's necessary when you need to delete things that are owned for your operating system, for instance. And then the other thing is -p or -protected. This you use an uppercase P actually, so that's going to be rm-p. Will overwrite the file 3 times before deleting it. So this is a more secure deletion option to make sure that no one could ever, for instance, take your hard drive and figure out how to recover the bits from it. So this is going to physically overwrite the area that the file was written in before with a bunch of garbage, so that so that you won't be able to recover it later. So if you want to make sure that you're deleting something securely, you can just add the -p flag and it will do the same thing. It will take a little bit longer because it's doing more stuff, but it will be more secure. So now I think we have a pretty good idea of how to edit our file system on a basic level. So that's going to be it for today. Next week, we're going to be moving into talking about executables and permissions, which are two of the, I think, more complicated and also much more important things to learn in the shell so that you really know what you're doing. So that's going to be all for today. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes in this series or future series in this tech by example sort of overarching framework that I'm doing. Share this video with any of your friends who you think want to learn how to use a shell, and be sure to stay tuned. I will see you in the next one, and goodbye.